Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. One answer to the question of the state interest here, and this is the answer that the judge seems to accept and believe, is that the state, and especially maybe New York State, which is America's financial capital, has an interest in clean financial disclosures, clean financial records. So here's the line that Kim was referring to before the break. The judge acknowledges defendants correctly assert that the record is devoid of any evidence of default, breach, late payment, or any complaint of harm, unquote. So 2 points. One is that he says, legally speaking, this is, quote, completely irrelevant. And so he says that this law under New York statutes does not require that in order for the state to come in and assert that these disclosures by the president were deceptive to these lenders. But it also seems to raise the question, Bill, whether, as I was saying, whether the state has an interest in policing the outer boundaries of puffery to discourage things that turn into outright deceit. And one thing that I think is interesting in this ruling is the president seems to think that he had a disclaimer on this financial information, so he could claim more or less anything that he wanted to. Here's a quote from Donald Trump in a deposition. I have a clause in there that says, don't believe the statement, go out and do your own work. This statement is worthless. It means nothing. And Bill, on one hand, the bankers that President Trump is working with are not naive people. They, A, have the ability to go out and do that work as President Trump describes and do their own evaluations and appraisals. And B, they know New York and they know these financial markets. They know the president's penchant for exaggerating his net worth, exaggerating the size of his assets. And so it's not like they were really fooled there. On the other hand, if you can say anything in a financial statement just because you put a quote unquote worthless clause on it, then heck, why not claim that the Trump Tower residence was 100,000 square feet?
Yeah. Does anyone think that we're going to get a more honest and clean real estate market in New York because of this? No, what Kim described is lawfare to go after Donald Trump. Look, authorities could come to my house, your house, probably Kim's house, and find 100 fire infractions if they wanted to and lay down fines. And from what you said before, the headline coming out of the story could easily have been Judge Engoron guilty of underestimated Mar-a-Lago by a factor of 10 or something. He made the same mistake. So you got to say, what are the motivations and what is the result going to be? The result is going to be they'll probably get Donald Trump on this, but I think the questions you raised, Kyle, they're likely to be the basis for appeal. I don't know how an appeal court would rule, but I think it is a powerful case that no one's profiting by the fraud or no one's being defrauded by the fraud. You have to wonder about the prosecution. I think when most people hear business fraud or real estate fraud, they think of someone that rips someone else off. And we don't have that here. And the appeals court will certainly have some interesting questions to wrestle with. But that'll be, a long time from now.
I do think that this point is a obvious one for Donald Trump to appeal. His lawyers in the last day have been talking about whether these were material statements that the lenders really relied upon to make their judgments. But Kim, I'm not sure that saying there was no default or anything really gets the falsehoods off the hook. If I make some exaggerations about the size of my assets in order to get a lower interest rate or to lower my payment, lower my car payment, I'm essentially tricking the other counterparty to take on more risk than they would have otherwise done and give up the profits potentially that they would have had if they had had the true information in order to bargain for better terms. And that's the argument that Letitia James is making, that the point here for President Trump was to get more favorable lending terms than he would have gotten. And obviously, I didn't move Bill very much making that argument a moment ago, but I wonder if I've moved you at all.
Sorry. I guess it comes down to whether or not you believe it. And that's my problem. Look, I think if this were any other real estate case, if this were any other, not any other, but most other prosecutors, that this was being handled in a neutral jurisdiction where you had a judge who didn't write page after page of a very caustic opinion, then maybe you could look at this and say, okay, the facts that are presented in this ruling from this judge are believable and therefore clearly over the top, and there's simply no excuse for what happened here. But again, I think the problem is once you have a judge that seems so invested in writing an opinion the way it did, that clearly it does include some facts that are easily disputable. For instance, suggesting Mar-a-Lago is only worth $18 million and presenting that simply as fact. And when we know that, in fact, the entire real estate world is full of judgments and complex disputes over how things are done, can you look at any of the rest of these claims that Letitia James is making or this judge is making? And do you feel like you're getting the whole story? And I think that that's what's really hard for me. It's just having been through real estate transactions myself. I mean, you listed an example. So, one of the things the judge called out Donald Trump on is said it was inappropriate for him to have tacked on 15 to 30% on the valuation of several of his golf clubs because of the Trump brand. Is that actually inappropriate? I don't know. I mean, is there some value? Do some people come to go golf at Trump golf courses simply because they want to be golfing at a Trump golf course? I just don't know. I'm not that big of an expert in real estate. But my bigger point is this is why we never want prosecutors to go down the road of politicized investigations, because it diminishes faith in the entire process and makes people question the merits and the actual statements of facts that are presented and wonder if they really are the facts or if they are some sort of biased opinion.
Well, on that specific point about the golf clubs, I think it's a little more nuanced than that because the judge says that these financial disclosures added that Trump premium while telling the lenders that there was no sort of premium based on the Trump brand included. The other thing in response to Kim, I guess I would say is I get that there is puffery in real estate. What I don't get is claiming that your home is 3 times the square footage that it actually is. That's what provides some distinctions, I think, here over the normal push and pull between buyers and sellers in a market for real estate as they're negotiating on the price. But let me say a little something for the defense here. The other piece of this that is fascinating is the remedy. So in the partial summary judgment from the judge last week, he sort of ruled that if this gets upheld, the Trump organization would lose control of its assets in New York. And Letitia James wants to go further than that. She wants a $250 million fine. She also wants to ban Donald Trump from doing business in the state of New York. And on the other side raises some eyebrows. Is that a proportionate punishment for these kinds of apparent falsehoods to the lenders, particularly given the fact that the lenders don't seem to have had any huge losses based on them?
No, I don't think it is. But I think stepping back, and my attitude is when I see that prosecutors and the system, the police, the prosecutors, and the judges, when they take an action against a citizen, they have a special obligation to be fair and neutral. That's why Lady Justice is blindfolded. In this case, it was so outrageous. I mean, the Attorney General campaigned on going after a citizen. So I'm not inclined to take the findings that seriously because I think the greater offense to public trust is what they did and how they did it. And I think that's the problem. And I think a lot of Americans have that kind of problem. It doesn't excuse Donald Trump for exaggerations or anything, but I think this is a real abuse of power. I mean, I lived in Asia for 10 years. I dealt with a lot of tin horn regimes, and this is what they would do. They would pass a law and then club you over the head with it. And I think that's kind of how this case is being handled. So many of the things, if they had Donald Trump dead to rights, they should have been able to do with the normal case, not go the way they did. So I find that really troubling, and it overwhelms what I think are individual parts of the case.
Kim, we'll give you the last word. This trial might continue for weeks or months, and then there will no doubt be appeals after it. And also remember that this is a civil trial, so this is about civil remedies. It's not criminal penalties. And so, in that sense, this might be one of the least of President Trump's legal problems in the months and years to come. And so, I guess in that sense, I don't expect it to have much of an effect on the 2024 presidential race. I don't know about you, but it seems like of all the things that might move voters, it wouldn't be this one. It would be those criminal trials potentially yet to come.
I think it depends on what voters you're talking about. I think that if you're talking about the average Republican primary voter, this isn't going to mean much to them. And in fact, it could even be a motivator to vote for Trump because it's lumped alongside all those other cases where the belief is that prosecutors have gone after Trump because he is Donald Trump. I think it nonetheless is potentially a problem for Donald Trump, especially were he to win the nomination and be in the general election for the same reason. And that I think that for many Democrats, but also for crucial swaths of independent voters, suburban voters who are already feeling not very friendly toward Donald Trump, very reluctant to ever cast a vote for him. It too will again get lumped in their minds in the wide swath of legal troubles that they think is potentially makes him unfit to be president again. So I don't think it's a nothing. I agree with you that I don't think it's an immediate danger to him because he can't land in jail because of it, but it can be very costly to him. And for the record, were he not to win the nomination, the threat of this lawsuit is very much taking away what has been some of the bread and butter of his, business and career for much of his life.
Thank you, Kim and Bill. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.